Hi, and welcome to Chapter 10, Strategy, Execution, Structure. In Chapter 10, we're going to be talking about the building blocks for organizational structure, 4 alternative organizational structures, factors to consider when selecting an organizational structure, and corporate restructuring. So, strategic implementation. When we're going to implement a strategy, there are 2 key points. So, we have to consider the plan for implementation before adopting a strategic alternative. And the greater the strategic change, the more complex the implementation. So this is referring to the corporate structure. So if we're going to implement a new corporate structure, we have to figure out what the plan for that implementation is, how many days, months, weeks, what we're going to be doing before, that time frame before we adapt a strategic alternative to implement. So really, what are the parameters here? And the greater the strategic change, the bigger the change to the structure of the organization, the more complex the implementation is going to be. So what is organizational structure? Well, this is the basic way a company gets things done. So an organization is a group of people, and they have to formulate them into a structure to conduct business. So it's a way to coordinate and control the organization to achieve objectives. So new businesses, when a business is new, it's typically smaller. It's going to have these same people perform multiple tasks, going to have a lot more control at the top owner management level, and they're going to facilitate direction over most aspects of the business. And this is what we call a very simple structure, where you have one owner or boss in charge, and they're going to direct the whole show of the organization. So as organizations grow, structures become more complex. So the simple structure, I think we can all understand. We've probably all worked for a small business, or at least witnessed the operations of a small business where, an owner manager is going to call the shots and really set the tone and the objectives for the small business and what he wants to get done. Now, as businesses grow, they're going to have different needs. And in the vertical growth, which refers to increasing in the length of the organization's hierarchy. So when we say hierarchy, we just mean the levels of management and what managers do. We're going to see the number of employees growing as the company grows, and the number of employees reporting to each management is going to represent what we call a span of control. So the span of control is how many people are the managers responsible for managing, and what's the scope of the projects or areas that they're managing or being in control of. So a very tall organization is going to have a lot of levels of hierarchy, a lot of different managers. So it's going to have shift supervisors, senior supervisors, assistant managers, directors, vice presidents, and a president. So these have many levels of control, whereas a flat organization may just have a couple of managers that are going to oversee a larger span of the business. So instead of having a tall organization may have 7 or more layers of management. A flat organization may have 2 to 6 layers of management. So that's how we kind of see how the people in the organization, if you stack them up under the managers, are they forming a really long chart of control, or is it very flat? And this could work depending on the business. This works. Some businesses, a flat organization works a lot better, and in some businesses, a tall organization works better. It just really depends on the type of business that's being conducted and the overall culture of the company. So then there's also centralized and decentralized. So when we talk about centralized, so when a functional structure is centralized, most strategic and operating decisions are made up at the top levels. So the directors, the vice presidents, they're going to make the biggest decisions, and they're going to be where, they're going to, when they say running up the flagpole, that's sort of a centralized structure where they're going to really have clear lines of responsibility and accountability by the top management. So the top management may lack some direct hands-on experience in the factory or in the offices, but that's what the middle and lower level managers are going to make up for. So decisions usually can occur slowly, because of that whole running up the flagpole thing, and lower level managers may be less committed to decisions made at the higher levels. But it's just a really centralized, organized type of organization where the top managers have a high level control. And this is pretty typical of an organization to be centralized. Well, some organizations would be what we call decentralized, where most of the decisions are made by the managers at the lower levels of the organization. And some advantages of decentralization is that you can empower these lower level managers to make decisions and implement them a lot quicker than having to get permission, having to talk to your boss, and your boss having to get permission from their boss, and their boss having to get permission from their boss. You see how long that could take. So a decentralized structure, you put more of the control at the lower level, which is good for situations where creativity and unusual situations can occur, and you need someone to think on the fly, such as companies that deal with the public quite often directly. You might want a little decentralization. And it's also companies that don't really have a real culture or environment of control. You can be a little bit more decentralized and spread out the responsibility. Now, when we talk about horizontal growth, this is, we're going to refer to the breadth of the organizational structure. So when we talked about before about the owner-manager with a few employees that may perform all the operations in a new business, however, with growth, each of the functions expands to the point where no individual can be involved in all the company's functions. And this is sort of like if you work for a small company, you see this. And that's one of the things where I appreciated working for small companies, because I get a chance to do many different things. And the scope of my overall job included many different responsibilities in many different areas. However, later on when I started working for larger companies, the scope narrowed quite a bit. As the organizations get bigger, they have to accommodate for more specialization. So employees, their focus of their responsibilities start to narrow, and that would be sort of a horizontal growth. So now, managers, as the company is growing, are going to have to be able to delegate and let go of responsibility and allow for the growth in these new structural positions to help keep control of the company and keep the company moving forward without overburdening one person with really, making too many decisions or being involved in too many things. So as companies get bigger, it's just naturally they'll lead to additional layers of management and to better be able to get all the work done. So this does help because you get more efficient the smaller scope of your responsibilities, so that's an advantage. But disadvantage might be the smaller scope of your responsibilities, you may not really see the big picture of everything the company is trying to do. And oftentimes very big companies can be burdened with red tape and bureaucracy that result from too complex of a horizontal structure. Now, when organizations get to the point where they're a little bloated and the organizational structure is too large and too many managers and supervisors have been hired, sometimes these companies have to conduct a downsizing. And the downsizing will be an event where they're going to restructure, kind of think about all the levels of management and lay off some managers and some supervisors to cut costs, eliminate some redundancies, and just overall make the company a little bit more efficient and a little bit more cost effective. A lot of times downsizing is a difficult thing to do. It's not always successful, but usually in the long term, the company does bounce back from it. So in the beginning, there could be some hard things to work around or some experience loss, but generally the companies, do oftentimes bounce back after the downsizing, after the awkward stage where they're trying to get everything back to an efficient level. So it is an awkward and challenging period, but usually companies have no choice where they really have to eliminate some relatively high-paid long-term employees to make sure the company can remain profitable and cost-effective. And this sometimes leads to a deterioration of morale. Okay, so let's talk about structural forms. We have 4 options. We have organize the structure by functions, organized by products, organized by geographical area, or have a matrix, which is sort of a hybrid combined structure. So each of these different structures have their own benefits. So let's talk about a functional structure. This is a structure most often talked about or demonstrated in college lectures and college. We almost teach our classes in a functional structure where you have a marketing class, operations management class, information systems class, a finance class, a human resource management class, an accounting class. So it's really organizing a company by these structured, these functional areas. So each of these, when we say functional area, we're talking finance, marketing, accounting, production, sales. So like the simulation we're working with, if you may have worked with, the simulations are usually broken up by, like, say, sales, marketing, operations, finance. And this is a way a lot of companies, I think most companies have this functional structure where, especially new organizations, and will typically start out with a functional structure because it's very easy to comprehend, lay out. The lines of your responsibilities are pretty clear, and you can get some economies of scale if the marketing department is doing the marketing for all the divisions of the company or all the brands of the company. They can get some, they can certainly get some, um, you know, if they put an order in for, say, a set of commercials or radio commercials, or they could put a bigger order in because they're ordering for the whole company, and they can get a discount in the size of the space they're buying. So it's things like that that can make these functional structures work out really well. And people are grouped with each other, and they kind of can help each other to be successful in their functional area. And when things change, it's easy. So if they make changes that are going to affect the marketing department, it's easy if the marketing department is just one department of the whole company rather than broken up into each product division or each sales division. So you really foster this group of specialists that's going to have a little bit more effective time in getting what they need to do. And it really depends on the type of business and the product of the business and where they're located to see how effective this structure can be. And sometimes this structure becomes less effective as companies get very big. This is very good structure for small and mid-size companies, but larger companies may need additional different structures when their companies become so big they're like a group of mid-sized company rather than one large company. So that's what brings us to the product division structure. So if you have a company that's pretty large, you may want to break the company up by its product division. So you could have self-contained entities, each responsible for producing, distributing, and selling its own products. So you could have sort of like Pepsi-Cola. They have their beverage division. They have their food division. As product one, product two could be their beverages or their food. They sell big area for them is chips and snacks. They also have the Quaker Oats brand. So those could be two examples of two different product divisions. So the responsibilities for profit and losses can be put down to each of those separate divisions, defined a little bit better, so you can really have more accountability. If one division is not doing as well, you could see where the problem is in the division, and you could even further break the division out by products to get a better idea of the profit center, and really try to tie the costs to each of these products as a separate entity, and really see who is contributing the most to the company, and then the decisions can be made at that very local level. So this is generally for companies that have groupings of products that can easily be separated into different divisions. You could use the profit center for profit center accounting for these divisions to really get a better accounting and a better idea of what these divisions or products are spending on advertising, research, development, promotion, how their sales are, their profits. So it's a way of kind of breaking the company up into something that makes a little bit more sense, sort of a multi-divisional approach. And it's quite common for companies that have multiple lines of products that are not identical, that are in different categories. You may want to manage them and group them and operate them like instead of one large company, you have one company has sort of 10 small size or mid-sized companies within it using this product divisional structure. Now, a graphical divisional structure is a way of, geographical is basically saying regions. So if we have a company that's a worldwide company, and we want to operate this company effectively, we may have to break it up by different regions. So maybe you're a dollar store retailer, and you may have to operate that dollar store differently between geographical regions in one country or geographical regions in multiple countries. So you could break up your divisions by the regions that have the most in common. So it could be as simple as North America, South America, Europe, Asia, Africa, as a way of a geographical divisional structure, or it could be as down to just divisions by each country, or even divisions within a single country, sort of like in the U.S. It could be north, south, east, and west, or northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest. However, would be a better grouping of geographical grouping of your company, and you want to group it in a way that you're going to have similar products and similar customers with similar tastes and wants and needs, so that the way the division can better manage their local area, the local wants and tastes, laws, regulations, sales territories, just a better way to handle your distribution. So sometimes having to worry about the distribution worldwide is too much. So having these regional managers and regional divisions is a lot easier to kind of break the company up into a regional structure rather than just trying to run it as one gigantic large structure. Okay, so a matrix structure is sort of a hybrid. So in a sense, it's the functional and divisional structures together, and both product and geographical. So this is a way of kind of blending these different structures together. So the traditional demands for quality and price may pull an organization towards the functional ends, whereas demands for service and speed may pull the organization towards a different divisional end. So to address these different concerns, top managers may settle for one of the two poles and may attempt to position the organization between the extremes. So such an approach gains considerable popularity in recent matrix structures, where we're going to have these functional vice presidents, but then we're going to also have these managers of different products. So that way you do have these functional areas as well as a product area. So you could have two or more supervisors or functional bosses that could intersect. So the VP of marketing, but overall, will be working with project manager A, B, and C, but project manager A, B, and C would be also a marketing manager. So they sort of work vertically and horizontally to have that vertical control where there's one marketing president of the whole company, but yet have that smaller divisional control where you have a lead marketing team in each of the product divisions. So it's a way of sort of trying to have it all and but it can be confusing because some people might wind up having two bosses, giving them requests to get things done at two different levels can sometimes be a little confusing. So communication is key to making these structures work. So this can be very effective where companies are trying to develop new products, trying to put more money into research and development, and enhance the experience for the consumer. This is always best done the closer you are to the consumer, sort of a product level. But also the company may want to remain control over the bigger decisions in a more functional area. So although most organizations may find it really difficult to implement a matrix, a lot of companies just naturally develop this matrix after, through organic growth of the company. They just kind of fall into this where they had a functional structure and they're trying to move into more of a divisional or product structure, so they can sort of sometimes operate both of them simultaneously. And if it works for the company, the complexity of the structure actually works, then they kind of keep with that and they move forward with it rather than eliminating one of the two structures. They have the structures work together, and that might be a better way of getting the best of both worlds, the overall control of what the company's doing and yet the overall decision-making responsibility at the brand level. Now, very critical to this is having a very effective brand manager, somebody who's going to manage the brand and pull together all their various aspects of what the company is trying to do with the product. So just looking ahead there a little bit. So the brand manager is really going to be the person in charge of that particular brand. And you could have, a food company with many different brands, or a cigarette company with many different brands, but you're going to have one manager who's really going to look after that brand like it's their child to try to get, the best amount of sales and profits out of that brand, and really focusing on positioning the brand for success. So it's sort of like having a set of managers just dedicated to the success of that one brand. And since their jobs really depend on that one brand being successful, it garnishes so much of their attention that it's much better than when you have a manager who's dealing with several brands at once. Usually one brand gets neglected or doesn't really have get paid attention to it as much as it should have. So ultimately, the brand manager is critical, especially for a matrix organization to be successful. Okay. So functional, product division, geographic division, matrix structures are the pure forms. So in reality, companies don't really work in such a pure, sterile textbook environment. Many times they have a tailored system that's a combination of 2, 3, or all 4 of these structures, depending on how the company has evolved through time and the strategic needs of the firm to achieve its goals and mission statements. That the firm structure could actually be something totally unique, a hybrid of these 4 structures, or something that is a little bit more innovative of a structure where everybody's sort of their own boss. It's a company of all managers, and they're so they're empowered to manage their area. So that way, that's an unusual structure, but some companies try to go that direction. You could have a company that has a very functional type of organization in its U.S. division, but overseas it may have more of a product structure or a matrix structure. So some companies can have, depending on how large the company is, they can have different structures depending on how big the company is and where they're operating out of. Now, when we're considering selecting a structure, there's a couple of things that really should think about. One is the level of corporate involvement in the business unit operations. So if there's a high level of corporate involvement, that's going to probably be a little more of a functional structure, might be better. Compatibility of the structure with the corporate profile and corporate strategy. So these 4 archetypes of structures that we had mentioned, which one would really fit, would be the most compatible with the company's corporate structure. The number of hierarchical levels of the organization. So if the organization already has a lot of management levels already, you may want to have if it's a very tall organization, you may want to stick with more of a functional structure. The extent at which the structure permits appropriate grouping of activities. So is this the way the company laid out? If everybody's in one building, it's a lot easier. If people are spread out across many campuses, it may be difficult to group the activities. So that has to be taken into account. The extent to which the structure promotes effective coordination, meaning that is it again where people's offices are, how the company is laid out, are they able to coordinate and work together? And today with technology and Skype and chat messaging, it's a lot easier and effective for companies to coordinate. The extent in which the structure allows the appropriate centralization or decentralization of authority, meaning that can the structure be flexible enough to decentralize authority in a way that will be effective for the organization to achieve its goals? And is the structure appropriate for that? Depending first if the company centralized or decentralized, we went over earlier. Some of these structures will work better centralized, so a functional structure is a little bit better for centralized, and a matrix might be better for a decentralized authority. So you want to really look at those pieces of the puzzle first. Now, corporate involvement in the business unit operations. So a business unit is like sort of a small company or a mid-sized company within a larger company. So the extent at which corporate managers are involved at the business level unit varies from one firm to another. So some companies, the business level units are pretty independent and operate almost completely independently. In some companies, there's a high level of control over it. So the involvement can be seen as a stabilizing, unifying force in the company that top executives like to keep the business units on the same page, the same track, And then some business unit managers refer to corporate in a less positive light, and they may view as interference in what they're overall trying to achieve. So it's really about, does the top corporation, if they want to have high control over the business units, they are going to sacrifice some innovation and creativity at the business unit level. So that's why some companies prefer to have the business units be as autonomous as possible, as long as they are achieving success and not stepping on other people's toes. And that's what the top manager really would want to do with these business units, to make sure that they're not sort of like parents with children. You don't want them to fight against each other or steal each other's sales, or get in each other's way. You really want to foster a growth-oriented environment for all the business units. And sometimes that can be best be done by being a little bit more involved at the top management in the units, and sometimes it's best done if they're less involved, and let them be a little bit more independent and feel a little bit more pride of ownership, and a little bit more pride in the success that the business units achieve. So that way it helps to motivate the companies when the managers treat their business units sort of like as their little company. Now, corporate restructuring can occur when a company structure just currently is no longer producing the results a company wants. So therefore, or an outside factor may occur that shrinks sales or profits or brings additional competition, or it just could be changing times where the company has to restructure to improve its efficiency and reformulate what's hopefully enhance the firm's performance. So restructuring efforts can include such actions as realigning divisions, combining divisions, breaking up divisions, reducing the amount of cash under different senior managers, acquiring or divesting business units. It could also be firing and combining management positions. So some of this restructuring is a way of, it can even incorporate a change in the basic structure of the company, moving from centralized to decentralized, tall to flat. It's usually moving from tall to flat. So the corporate restructuring is the type of change that we want to do to hopefully improve the profitability of the firm, the efficiency in the firm's performance. So it's a way of looking at and sort of rethinking the whole company and reestablishing, a structure that's going to be, that the change is going to be positive for the company to move forward. It's going to help to set the company up for future success. And the problem with restructuring is some people have to get laid off. Morale can suffer. Some managers can resist or work against it or be hostile towards the change and not really embrace the company's idea of restructuring. Outsiders can be brought in to help manage or run or facilitate the restructure, and that can also place stress or strain on the company. So usually very large organizations will do this, and usually a recession or some great change in the company's overall dynamics could facilitate this. And we've had many companies that had to restructure in the past in order to survive. So sometimes stockholders may not, when they hear restructuring, they may think the company's in trouble, the stock may do poorly, but not all restructurings wind up with the company doing poorly. Many restructurings wind up to be quite successful. Okay, so let's talk about forms of commerce. So we have a little matrix here, a little grid. So we could have B2B, but business to business, and a lot of companies I worked for were B2B, where one business sells to another business. So I worked for defense contractors that manufactured parts to sell to other defense contractors, so that was very B2B. It could be wholesalers selling to retailers, that's B2B, and typically within this business you sell on credit and you hope to be paid between 30 and 90 days. There's also B2C, business to consumer. This is what you're used to mostly, where businesses sell directly to consumers. Since you are a consumer, you know the businesses you buy products from. That would be B2C. So typically any retail stores you go into to buy products would be B2C. And we have B2G. And this was also in the defense industry. Sometimes we took contracts and sold directly to the government. So B2G would be winning a contract or being awarded a contract from the government and working to produce a product or a service directly for the government. Now, on the consumer level, we have C2B, and this is where consumers are going to be working to sell things to businesses or offers to businesses. So Priceline, where you name your own price and businesses could take it or leave it, is an example of consumer to business, where consumers are getting involved with the purchase price and negotiation to businesses, or C2C, consumer to consumer, sort of like your eBay or your Airbnb or your, in some extent, sort of like an Uber, where, although an Uber is sort of a corporate entity, but it's where a consumer is selling to another consumer. Think like this, the lowest level would be like a yard sale, and eBay would be like the biggest level of that. So those are different ways that, forms of commerce and forms of electronic commerce as well. So we know electronic commerce, it could be any of those other business situations, but done through the internet. So we know that we're used to buying things through the internet and having business models that are solely on the internet. And there could be business models like clicks and bricks, where Apple, you can buy things directly from Apple line, or you could go to the retail stores. So it's trying to build some synergy between storefronts and virtual storefronts. So sometimes you may have a company like Apple that sells online and in a retail location. You can have now Amazon, which sells online but also sells through Whole Foods. So there are many different, and you have a lot of retailers who want to get in on the online sales and compete with Amazon. So you have just about every retailer trying to have an online division as well to sell to or sell through. Okay, so that's it for chapter 10, sort of a short chapter. And I look forward to seeing you next time when we discuss chapter 11. Thank you.